Well, welcome to our Bible study. It's good to be here with you to learn a little bit about Jesus. Well, today, Jesus is going to feed 4,000 families. And then following that, he's going to go to a little bit different place and he's going to have some conflict with the Pharisees. But first, let me ask you a question. What is the largest number of people you've ever had a meal with? You say, wow, my family's pretty big. We one time had all 50 of us. We had to eat outside. Nobody couldn't fit them in our house, but we ate with 50 people. And then there was that time we had that potluck at the church, and there was probably 200 people there. I don't know, a lot of people. Well, the reason I mention this is today Jesus is going to have a meal with 4,000 other families. That's a big potluck, isn't it? It's a lot of people, and Jesus is going to feed them. Let me ask you this question. Were you ever so hungry that you were about to faint? Say, well, yeah, it was that one time at work. We had to work right through lunch, and it was hot out. We were working, and all of a sudden, it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I realized I didn't have lunch, and I felt really faint. And I think we all have. Once in a while, we get so engrossed in what we're doing, so busy that we don't eat, and then we get so hungry that we're about to faint. Well, the people that Jesus was with hadn't eaten for a couple days, and they were so hungry they were about to faint. Let me ask you this. Have you ever experienced a miracle? Say, well, my son was born. That was a miracle, I guess. And Jesus answered some prayers, helped me through a difficult time, got me a job. Maybe those were miracles. But I'm talking about a supernatural miracle. Like when Jesus calmed the sea, or today when Jesus feeds people with just a couple loaves of bread. You ever see anything like that? No, not very many people have. I know one time Jesus healed me, and I knew it was a miracle, but it was convincing for me, but not for other people, even though I tell them about it, because they didn't see it. Well, today, the Pharisees are going to ask Jesus for a miracle. Now, they knew Jesus had done miracles before, but they wanted to see one for themselves, and we'll see how that works out. Let me ask you this question. Would you ever go hungry, or what would you go hungry, what would you give up a meal for? What would you give, what would you be so interested in that you would rather do that than eat a meal? Oh, some of you might say, from our generation, they might say, wow, I would do that to see Elvis back when he was still alive. I'd give up a meal. Or maybe some other rock star. Maybe I'd give up a meal to see Billy Joel back in the days when I liked Billy Joel. I'm not so into him anymore. But, there may be some performers. Or maybe you'd say, I'd give up a meal to see the Vikings win the Super Bowl. Or maybe go to see any football game. Or maybe you'd give up a meal like me. I'd give up a meal if someone to give me tickets to to watch the Minnesota Wild play. Or maybe you'd say, well, I would give up a meal to listen to Jesus speak. If I could hear Jesus speak live, I'd give up a meal for that. And in fact, that's what the people that Jesus is going to end up feeding today had done. They hadn't eaten for a couple of days. They stayed with Jesus because they were so enthralled with his teaching. And you'd say, well, for sure, I think we'd all give up a meal to see Jesus perform a miracle. Wouldn't you give up a meal if you could be there when he changed the water into wine? Or if you could have been there when he calmed the sea? Or when he fed the 5,000 people? Or maybe when he cast the demon out? I was like, be gone, and the demon leaves. It would be wonderful. I'd give up a meal to see that. Well, let's get into the background. See, Jesus is in the Gentile region of the Decapolis. And so the Decapolis is 10 cities. This is a Gentile region. What's a Gentile? Gentile is simply a people who are not Jewish. There's Jewish peoples and Gentile people. And the Jewish people really looked down. They were very prejudiced, very racist against anyone that wasn't a Jew, and they were racist against the Gentiles. And also, where Jesus is not only it's a Gentile region, it is in a remote place, no stores, no bakeries, no stores, and he's with thousands of people. And the crowd, in this case, was mostly Gentiles. Mostly this was a crowd of people who were not Jewish. It becomes very interesting in light of this miracle. And remember that 6 months before this is when Jesus is going to feed 4,000 families. 6 months before this, Jesus had fed 5,000 families. Now, these families were Jewish people. So 6 months before, he fed 5,000 Jewish families. Today he's going to feed 4,000 Gentile families. Let's get right into the scripture. Mark 8:1. In those days, when there was again a large crowd and they had nothing to eat, Jesus summoned his disciples and said to them, first of all, there was a large crowd who had how much to eat? They had nothing to eat. In those days, he was in the Decapolis. In those days, he was in the Decapolis. That's how we know that he was in the Decapolis, the region of the 10 cities. Verse 8:2, Jesus says, I feel compassion for the people because they have remained with me for 3 days already and have nothing to eat. He said, these people have stayed with me. They have nothing to eat. They probably haven't eaten for a couple days. So why did Jesus have compassion on the crowd? Well, they stayed with Jesus for 3 days. He had compassion on them. They stayed even though they were hungry and they had nothing to eat. They stayed to the point of fainting. And furthermore, it is Jesus' nature to be compassionate. So you want Jesus to be compassionate on you? Maybe you should spend some time not eating, being with Jesus, and asking him and being with him and not eating. This is the whole principle of fasting, actually. But these people had nothing to eat, and Jesus felt compassion on them because they stayed with him. And Jesus says, and if I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way, and some of them have come from a great distance. So why did Jesus want to feed them? Well, so they wouldn't faint from hunger on the way home, because he had compassion. We don't want to see any of these people fainting from hunger on their way home. And furthermore, he wanted to give them nourishment for their long journey. So there's the scene. And his disciples replied to him, where will anyone be able to find enough bread here in this desolate place to satisfy these people? I mean, there's no stores, there's no villages, there's nothing, there's no place to go and get bread. They said, how are we going to do this? Where are we going to find enough bread to satisfy all these 4,000 families? You see, they were in the wilderness, no opportunity to get bread. And 6 months before, though, what did Jesus do? 6 months before, this is in the fall of the year and the spring of the year, and 6 months before, Jesus had fed 5,000 families. How could his disciples question him? How could they question him? 6 months before, he had fed 5,000 families. This was only 4,000 families. Well, A, they forgot about the 5,000? They forgot he fed the 5,000? I don't think so. Well, feeding 5,000 people with a few loaves and fishes would be something you would forget very quick, but maybe, I don't know. Maybe, maybe we have a tendency to forget the things Jesus did, but I don't think they forgot that great miracle. Or maybe they were thinking, would Jesus feed these Gentiles? These were Gentiles, remember? Jews didn't like Gentiles. Would Jesus do it? Would Jesus take this next step and feed Gentile people? Or maybe they would say, would Jesus repeat a miracle? That 5,000, feeding the 5,000, that was a great miracle. Would Jesus repeat that miracle? Or maybe they were thinking, Jesus sent away people hungry before. Maybe he would do it again. I don't know. Or maybe the feeding of the 5,000 was such a great miracle. And it was a great, great miracle. It was such a great miracle that they dared not think that Jesus would do it again. So I don't know. This is kind of a mystery to me. Why they would question Jesus. They certainly, I don't think that, maybe they did, but I don't think they forgot about the 5,000. Mark 8:5, and he was asking them, how many loaves do you have? And they said, 7. So Jesus asked, how many loaves do you have? And the disciples said, 7. Mark 8:6, and he directed the people to recline on the ground, and taking the 7 loaves, he gave thanks, looked up to heaven, broke them, and started giving them to his disciples to serve. And they served them to the people. Now remember, these loaves were little dinner roll kinds of things. These aren't loaves of bread. There's loaves of bread. If they were loaves of bread, there's 4,000 families there, but there's these loaves of bread. So Jesus, what did he do? He had the people sit down. He gave thanks. He gave the food to the disciples, and the disciples served the people. Now here's some interesting notes about this miracle. First of all, first note is that the Greek text, remember that these original documents, the gospel was written in Greek. The Greek text indicate that as Jesus continually, as he broke the bread, he continually did that time after time after time. You can tell from the tense that they were used. He continually broke the bread, gave it to his disciples until all the people had eaten and they were full. And this undoubtedly took a long time, feeding 4,000 people, even when you have 12 disciples serving them. Going back and forth, it probably took some time. Note that Jesus worked with his disciples. Now, this is the way Jesus works very often. Jesus does the heavy lifting. Now, if he'd have said, you feed them to his disciples, they couldn't have done it. They had no possibility of doing it. They had no way to go buy bread. They didn't even have the money to do it. How could they feed them alone? But with Jesus, it was easy for them to be part of this. What was their job? Their job was taking the bread from Jesus and bringing it out and giving it to the people. Taking the bread from Jesus, giving it to the people. It's easy for them. A lot of times when Jesus asks you to do something, he does the heavy lifting, and your part is easy. He does the hard part. Sometimes it's more difficult, but a lot of times it's very easy to do what Jesus wants because he gives you the resources to do what he asks you to do. I also want you to note, who were the disciples serving? They were serving Gentiles. These were Jewish people, Jewish men, serving Gentile families. Jews didn't do that in those days. And this is again Jesus telling people that he is for everybody. Don't be prejudiced against anybody. There is nobody that all people deserve to have Jesus. We need to serve all people, not just Jewish people. That's what he was telling them. We need to serve all people. And also I want to tell you, and people make a big deal about this, but I want to tell you that this is a different miracle than feeding the 5,000. Now, there's some similarities, but it is a different miracle. In fact, Jesus says it's a different miracle later in the next Bible study that we do. And people will go to great lengths talking about the differences. We're not going to take the time to do that. Just know it is a different miracle. Verse 8-7. And they also had a few small fish, like sardines, a few small fish. And after he'd blessed them, he told the disciples to serve them as well. Now, Jesus also multiplied the small fish, and probably these were sardine-sized, little tiny fish, probably salted to preserve them, and they were used as a garnish to flavor bread. A little bit of relish to put on the bread. They'd be eaten a little bit at a time, so they give the bread a little bit better flavor. Verse 8-8, and they ate and were satisfied. And they picked up 7 large baskets of what was left over of the broken pieces. You see, Jesus satisfies. You hungry? Jesus will satisfy you. Jesus satisfies. One of the great things about Jesus, he satisfies. This is also fulfillment of a prophecy. If you look to Psalm 132:15, talking about the Messiah, the Psalm says, I will satisfy her needy with bread. And that's what Jesus was doing. He fulfilled this prophecy. By the way, these baskets, they weren't baskets. They were baskets. They were big enough to put a small man in. For instance, this is the same kind of basket that, if you remember in Acts, they led Paul out of town by putting him in a basket and lowering him over the wall. This is the same size basket that Paul was in. This is a big basket. So if they had 7 rolls about this size, and they picked up how many large baskets? 7 large baskets. They had a whole lot more afterwards than when they started. A great miracle. Had enough food for a long time afterwards for the disciples. And If I didn't say it before, I'm going to say it again. I'll probably say it again because it's an important point. Jesus is the bread of life for everybody, for Jews and Gentiles, for you. Jesus is the bread of life for you and for all the different kinds of people. And there is no room for racism, no room for prejudice in Jesus' church. There just is no room. Mark 8:9. About 4,000 men were there, and he dismissed them. After they were satisfied, they ate. So now you can go home and you won't faint on the road. So the 4,000 men probably had their wives and children there. So how many people did Jesus feed? Maybe 8,000, maybe 16,000. I don't know. It's a lot of people. Certainly more than 4,000. Just 4,000 men. And immediately Jesus got into the boat with his disciples, and they came to the region of the Dalmanthia. Now, Dalmanthia is probably on the west shore of the Sea of Galilee. So how do you know that? Well, the theologians look at all the scriptures around that and where Jesus had been, but the truth of the matter is they don't know exactly where it is, somewhere on the west shore of the Sea of Galilee. But the exact location is not known. Also, kind of an aside, Jesus made extensive use of the disciples. Remember, the disciples were fishermen, so they had access to boats. So it was a whole lot easier to sail from place to place in a boat than it was for them to walk. So he made extensive use, especially on this particular journey that he's on now. He made extensive use of the boats. Mark 8:11. And the Pharisees came out and began to argue with him, demanding from him a sign from heaven to test him. They were demanding a sign. Perform a miracle. You will perform a miracle for me. Now, where is Jesus? Jesus had left Gentile territory, and now he's in Jewish territory. Now the Pharisees would never go into Gentile territory. They wouldn't step 1 inch into it. Those Pharisees, now Jesus back in Jewish territory, the Pharisees come back and start arguing with Jesus. One reason that Jesus had left to go into the Gentile territory was to get away from all the arguing with the Pharisees. But now he's back. Now the Pharisees step up their attacks again. They're demanding a sign for him. Now, why would the Pharisees ask for a miracle? Now, why would they do that? Well, one reason is the great prophets performed miracles. Remember, Moses did great miracles, parted the Red Sea, and called plagues down on Egypt when Pharaoh wouldn't let God's people go. Elijah did great miracles. The great prophets did great miracles. They said, Jesus, if you're a great prophet, you should be able to do great miracles too. Well, in fact, Jesus did do great miracles. They just had heard about them. They hadn't seen them for himself. Furthermore, they knew that Messiah would perform miracles. We just learned about that. One prophecy was going to feed people with bread. And there were many, many, many other prophecies about Jesus, that he would heal the blind and the lame and the people who couldn't talk and so forth, cast out demons. There was all these prophecies about Messiah. And they were thinking, because they had the Pharisees of the first 5 books of the Bible memorized. They knew the prophecies about Messiah, but they refused to believe that Jesus was fulfilling them. I think that they needed to see a miracle for themselves. I think they really, really needed to see a miracle for themselves. I've heard about miracles, but I'm not going to believe until I see this miracle for myself. And furthermore, we are the Pharisees. You need to come to us and you need to perform for us. We'll tell you what to do and you do it. And, a lot of people have that attitude about God. A lot of people have that attitude about Jesus. They say, Jesus, I want you to come and be my servant. And that's not the way it works. We believe and we become Jesus' servant. Jesus isn't our servant. Jesus is God. We're not God's servants. We are God's servants. God isn't our servant. Also, I think that they wanted to use it as an excuse not to believe. If he does a miracle, they're going to say that miracle was done by Satan. If he doesn't do the miracle, he said, well, he can't be the Messiah. He can't be who he says he is. He's a liar because he didn't do any miracles for us. So they were looking for an excuse not to believe. Also, they were demanding. And it's probably not a good thing to demand of God. Mark 8:12, sighing deeply in his spirit. Why did he sigh so deeply? I think because he really, really wanted the Pharisees to believe. Sighing deeply in his spirit, he said, why does this generation demand a sign? Truly I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation. He looked at the Pharisees and says, no, I'm not going to do it. I could do it, but I'm not going to do it. So why did Jesus say no miracles for the Pharisees? He had performed many miracles, and they knew about them. They clearly knew about them. He had performed lots of miracles. He performed enough. He performed many more. He knew they would not believe. Jesus knew their hearts. He knew their hearts were hardened. And he knew that they weren't going to believe. And they had ample evidence. They knew about all the other miracles. They knew about the prophecies that he fulfilled. And they were looking for excuses not to believe. And their motivation was evil. Their motivation was bad. Now what's really interesting is some of these same Pharisees that are arguing with Jesus, Jesus is crucified, dies, and Jesus raises from the dead, and guess who starts believing? Not all the Pharisees, but after Jesus rose from the dead, some of the Pharisees became some of the first Christians. So they say, he really is the Messiah. He rose from the dead. Look at all the prophecies he fulfilled, because they knew. But at this point, their hearts were hardened, and very few of them. There's still a couple of Pharisees that believed at this point, but very, very few of them. But after he rose from the dead, some of the Pharisees, a number of Pharisees believed, and a number of the priests also, because they knew the scripture, and it was obvious then when he rose from the dead that he was the Messiah. And leaving them again, he embarked, boat, right? He embarked and went away to the other side. So Jesus left the Pharisees and the region that he was in. All right, here's my summary. First and foremost, Jesus is for everybody. Jesus is for you. No matter who you are, Jesus is for you. Are you hungry for Jesus? I hope you're hungry for Jesus. Are you hungry for Jesus? Follow him. He's going to fill you up. Follow him. You're hungry for Jesus. Give what you have to Jesus. Give what you have. Give yourself to Jesus. It's enough. It doesn't have to be a lot. Jesus wants you, me too, wants us. He wants you to be compassionate. Look for opportunities to be compassionate for people. Be compassionate. Jesus was compassionate. He wants you to be compassionate. Don't forget to say thank you to for your food. You know, Jesus said thank you to God for the food that he created. Isn't that something? Jesus wants to use you in the work. He wants to use you. He's got a job for you to do, even if you're in a nursing home. I don't care if you're bedroom. He's got something for you to do. He's got something for you to do. And he's going to do most of the heavy lifting. He's going to make it easy for you, but he wants you to take that step, that figurative step, and join in the work with him. And maybe if you're in bed, the only thing you can do, maybe you can pray. I don't know. There are things you can do. You know, the miracles, these great miracles that Jesus did, when he heals the people who can't see, and when he multiplies the loaves, when he calms the sea, this gives us confidence in Jesus' claims. So when Jesus says that he is the Messiah, that he's God's son, that he's God, we can believe him. These miracles give us confidence. When Jesus says that if you believe in him, you're going to live forever, you're going to get a resurrected body and go to be with him forever in heaven. When he give these promises, we have confidence because we see the miraculous things that he did that nobody else could ever do. Don't forget what Jesus has done. The disciples might have forgotten don't forget what Jesus has done. Don't forget. Don't forget what he's done for you. Don't forget what he's done recorded in the Bible. Look for reasons to believe. Please look for reasons to believe. Don't look for reasons to disbelieve. You can always find some reason. Look for reasons to believe. And be careful about putting God to the test. Now, sometimes we do. They say, God, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure if you want me to do this or that. Could you please help me? Could you please show me? But don't demand. Don't say, God, unless, and that people do this, God, unless you do this for me, I'm never going to believe in you ever. I'm going to curse you unless you do this for me. And don't be like that. Don't be like that. Don't be like that. Jesus is not our servant. We are his servants. All right, we're cutting down to 3 prayers. I think the COVID's under control pretty much, so we're going to quit. I'm going to quit asking you to pray every day. Now, you may want to still continue to pray for the COVID because there's places in the world where it's still raging. But in the United States, we're doing pretty good, and especially in the nursing homes, we're doing pretty good. So we're down to 3 prayers. First prayer I want you to pray every day. Pray for salvation for those around you. If you're in a facility, what I'm talking about is the residents, the staff, all the people that come in, and your families. Just simply pray. I pray that they would all hear, believe, and go to heaven. If you're going to school, pray for your teachers, the same thing, or however. Just pray for your family, pray for the people around you, that they would hear about Jesus, believe, and go to heaven. It's great evangelical prayer. Secondly, pray against racism. Enough said. Just God, I pray against racism in Jesus' church. I pray against racism in our great country. And the third prayer, please pray for unity. Pray for unity in Jesus' church. Pray for unity in our great country. And now, there's only one thing left to say. Say it with me. Aloha. See you there. God bless you all. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching.